Hello everyone, this is Mrs. G's Story Time, and we are reading Treasures of the Snow by Patricia Sanjan, with permission of Moody Publishing Company. We are reading Chapter 21, An Unforgettable Night. Once in his room, Lucien moved with great speed. There wasn't a minute to be lost. He put on his cloak, his woolly hat that came down over his ears, and his strongest boots. Then he wrote a note to his mother telling her that he would not be back until morning. He tiptoed down the stairs into the kitchen and filled his pockets with bread and cheese and a box of matches. Then he silently lifted the latch of the back door and crept to the barn. The storm lantern hung on the wall, and Lucien lit it. The steady light comforted him. He wondered whether to take his skis, but decided it was too dark. He opened the far door of the barn and stepped out into the windy snow meadows, and the blizzard nearly knocked him over. He was safely away. His great adventure had begun. If the wind was like this in the field, he wondered what would it be like on the pass. Surely he would be blown over and buried in the drifts. Well, he would see when he got there. In the meantime, he must think hard about reaching the old man. It was a relief to reach the woods, and here at the last he was sheltered, and the snow on the path was not so deep, even though the trees made spooky noises. He would move more quickly without falling over. Up he went through the tossing trees until he could see the orange glow of a light in the old man's window. He struggled to the door and knocked. "Who's there?" said the old man very cautiously within. "Me, Lucien." The door flung open at once, and the old man helped him inside. "Lucien, my boy," he cried, peering at him in astonishment. "Whatever brings you here this weather? And look, at this time of night, what has happened?" Lucien sat down on the bench for a moment to get his breath back. He did not like asking the old man for his money, but he really needed it badly. "You once said," began Lucien, looking up into the old man's face, "that you had a lot of money to give someone if they really needed it. I've found someone who really needs it. If you will give me your money, I think that little Danny Bernet's leg might be made better." "How can that be?" asked the old man, looking very closely at the boy. "There's a doctor at the hotel where my sister works," explained Lucien, "who can cure lame people and heal broken bones. I'm going now to ask him to come and see Danny. But my sister said he would want a lot of money." "You're going now?" repeated the old man. "In this weather? You've got to be bad, boy. You can never cross the path in this weather." "I think I could," replied Lucien, "on my skis. The blizzard started only a few hours ago, and the fresh snow won't be deep yet, if I hurry. But it's no good unless I have the money." The old man did not answer for a minute, and then he seemed to be thinking very hard. "Oh, I would give it if I was sure of this man," he said doubtfully. "But I don't want to waste or lose it. How do I know that he's an honest man? What is his name, Lucien?" "His name is Monsieur Gevet. My sister says he's a famous man." "Monsieur Gevet?" The old man repeated the words softly in a strange voice, as though he thought he might have made a mistake about them. He seemed to have turned rather pale, but without another word he turned around, took a key from his old carved boxes, and opened a little cupboard in the wall behind his bed. He took out an old sock stuffed with bills. "Take it all," he said, "and give it to Monsieur Gevet. Tell him it is all his if he will cure the child. Tell him, Lucien, that it is a payment of a debt." His voice shook a little, and Lucien glanced at him in surprise, but he was too glad to wonder much. He had never seen so much money before in his life. He put the whole bundle inside of his shirt, buttoned his coat and cloak over it, and made for the door. "Thank you very much," he said hesitantly at the door. "I'll come and tell you what happened." The old man came to the door to watch him go and held his lantern high to light the path. Lucien had only gone a few steps when the old man called to him loudly above the wind, "Lucien!" Lucien ran back. Yes, monsieur?" "You won't forget the message, will you?" "No," replied Lucien carefully. "I'm to say it's a payment of a debt. I won't forget. Goodbye, monsieur." He was making off again into the night when the old man called him again. "Lucien!" There were The boy ran back, feeling impatient now, and he wanted to get going. "Yes, monsieur?" "You won't tell him anything about me, will you? Don't tell him my name, will you, Lucien?" "I don't know your name," Lucien reminded him. "And don't tell him where I live." "No, monsieur," Lucien answered him, too impatient to wonder why. "I'll just say it's a payment of a debt. Goodbye, monsieur." He sped off as fast as he could through the deep, soft snow, afraid that the old man might call him again. At the edge of the woods, he turned and waved his lantern. Through the whirling snow, he could still see the dim figure of the old man, black against the light of his open door. He must be very quick. The snow was still falling. Very soon the pass would be impossible to cross, if it is not already. He thought it probably would be impossible to cross on foot, so he decided to stop in the woodshed on his way down and get his skis. He had just lifted his skis down from the far door of the cowshed. Door was flung open, and his mother and Marie came in, waving a lantern. Lucien propped his skis against the wall and fell flat on his face on the dirty floor behind the largest cow. "He's not here," said his mother with a sharp, worried voice, flashing her lantern around the shed. "I believe you're right, Marie. He's got some idea about going to that doctor. He'll be stumbling along on that mountain road by now, and that stupid boy hasn't even taken his skis. I wonder if we could persuade Monsieur Benet to go after him and fetch him back. He can't have gotten far on foot." "I think we'd better," agreed Marie. Her voice sounded worried, too. "Monsieur Benet could easily catch up with him on skis and stop him before he gets anywhere really dangerous. Let's go now and ask him." They went off hesitantly, and Lucien, pressed against the cow's body, jumped to his feet. There wasn't a moment to lose. It would take them 2-3 minutes to get on the coats and the boots, and in this weather it'd take them 15 minutes to reach the Bernet's chalet. Another 10 minutes while they told the story, and Monsieur Benet collected his lantern and boots and skis. Lucien worked out that he roughly half an hour's start. It should be enough. But then he was only a light child, and Monsieur Benet was a heavy, skillful man who could ski much faster than Lucien. Very, very carefully, he crept out from the cowshed, relit the lantern, and fastened on his skis. And carefully he started off, keeping his head down because the blizzard was blinding. Down over the meadows, he once again reached the friendly shelter of the forest path, where he could look in front of him. Out across the low fields he sped, and here the wind was less furious, and he could look straight ahead. He made his way through the deserted village, looking around worriedly in case anyone should see him and want to know where he was going. But everyone was indoors on such a night. He crossed the silent market square with its frozen fountain, past the dairy, over the bridge, and then he paused for breath. He glanced back, fearful in case Monsieur Benet should be following, but there was no one in sight. Now he had reached the lowest part of the valley and must start the climb up over the pass that ran between the two mountains. He suddenly felt terribly lonely, and for a moment he almost wished Monsieur Benet would catch him. But he pushed the thought away and began his climb. The snow on the valley road was not too bad. Lucien put his skis over his shoulder and found that he could walk without much difficulty. The blizzard seemed to be stopping. Once again he went into the woods and climbed, weary and afraid. These were dark, strange woods that he did not know, and he was not even sure if he was on the right path. And if he wasn't, it might lead to a cliff. He could hear the howling wind and the rushing streams above him, and his skis seemed heavier and heavier. He climbed through the woods for 3 hours, his mind full of fears and horrors of all the dangers that were to be found on the mountains. Avalanches, treacherous snowdrifts, breaking tree boughs. He thought of the St. Bernard dogs trained to rescue lost travelers. Of course he could go back. He stopped for a moment, wondering why that thought had not occurred to him before. How simple it would be to buckle on his skis and zigzag down the forest path and go home. "I did my best," he would tell them, "but I couldn't get through." The Bernets would no doubt think he was very brave to have even tried. The wind was roaring horribly now, and the great trees seemed to be crying loud and tossing their arms. He was nearly at the top of the forest, out in the wild waste of the pass, where the wind might pick him up and whirl him over the rocks like a snowflake. He found his teeth were chattering and he was crying. "I'm so frightened," he sobbed to himself. "I can't go on. I know I'll be killed on the pass. I wish Monsieur Benet would come." As he stooped to buckle on his skis, he suddenly remembered the warm, sheltered moment when he and Annette and Grandmother sat around the stove together, and Grandmother talked about being afraid. Perfect love drives out fear. If we really believe that Jesus loves us perfectly, there is nothing left to be afraid of. If he loves us perfectly, he will never let anything really harm us. Lucien realized he was not alone at all. Grandmother had said that Jesus loved him perfectly, and if he loved perfectly, he would not leave a child alone in the darkness and danger. It was just as though someone stronger than the night, the wind, the terror, and the darkness had suddenly come to him and taken his hand and pointed him up the mountain. Lucien decided to go on. Perfect love drives out fear, he murmured to himself over and over again. It was true. It was true, too. He had stopped feeling so terribly frightened because he had stopped feeling alone. He had reached the top of the forest and came out into the open, and now he could think of nothing at all except how to go on. He struggled on, foot by foot, bent nearly double because the pain of the cold wind on his face was more than he could bear. At times the snow was over his knees, but he kept going. One icy blast knocked him onto his back, and he feared he wouldn't be able to get up again, but a little strength seemed to be returned, and he struggled to his feet again. At last he found that the ground in front of him sloped gently downwards, and he knew he had crossed the pass. Soon he reached the forest again, and the wind dropped. He felt numb with cold. Thankfully he realized he had not missed his way. God had certainly been guiding him. He zigzagged carefully through the trees on the forest trail, feeling glad to be sheltered from the wind that had beaten the sense and feelings out of him. Down, down, down. The forest was almost quiet now, for he was traveling towards the deep valley. When at last he glided into the open, the fields lay still and silver on the moonlight, and the dark town was below him. In a half an hour's time he would be there, knocking on the door of the great hotel, and then... If Jesus really loves me perfectly, thought Lucien, he can't let me come all this way for nothing. Too tired to think any more, he set out across the meadows towards the town. Tomorrow we'll be reading chapter 22. Lucien finds Monsieur Gavette. I love you, and I'm praying for you, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.